Do you know why it took so long for this to occur?
Well, I mean, I think if you look at it, you know, the UK's history in Albania is really not that long. You know, certainly, of course, there was the involvement during World War II, but what you saw as well is that period, obviously, of the communist regime, you know, where the UK didn't have relations with Albania. In the 90s, we were very much more focused on the former Yugoslavia, the interventions in Bosnia and in Kosovo. Even during the 90s, for a large part of it, we covered Albania from our embassy in Rome. So it was really only been in the last 20, 25 years that Albania has started to figure, if you like, within our own consciousness, I think. And so, you know, politically, as we know, 3 years ago, things were quite difficult. Things have changed hugely. We're in a very different place now. We have some really very positive cooperation between our different law enforcement agencies, between our domestic ministries. You know, last year I was hosting the senior official from the Home Office, senior officials from the Ministry of Justice. It's a very different relationship now. And I think building on that, the Prime Minister had obviously been very keen to come, and the EPC was very much the excuse for him to do so.
This is what I was going to ask. If the EPC summit hadn't taken place, do you think he would have visited? It would have been on the cards in the near future?
I think so. I mean, I don't, I would not necessarily have been in May, but it would have been at some time.
And he was excited to come?
Yeah, I think, again, just very interested in what is not a country that's not particularly well known. So I think, as I say, being here for the first time in Tirana, having a good period of time with the Prime Minister to talk about a whole range of different things, an opportunity as well to meet British and Albanian soldiers who are working together, to improve the abilities of the Ukrainian armed forces, was a real special time. And I think that's, what I noticed was very much his enthusiasm to kind of continue to be involved. And obviously we're hosting the Berlin Process Summit in October. But by the end of the 2 days, he was already giving instructions to his team as to what he wanted out of that. So I thought that triggered some good stuff. And I know as well from the team that being here for the European Political Community Summit really helped to set up the UK-European Union Summit on the following Monday. And so obviously there was a whole series of negotiations going on. And being here, being able to see Madame van der Leyen and others really helped. So I think, again, this reinforces the kind of role that Albania is currently playing. We've now seen confirmation that Albania will host the NATO summit in 2027.
Huge,
again, these are big things.
And do you think his impression of Albania was more positive than he anticipated? Was he sort of, I guess 2 days is not really enough for the full Albanian experience, but again, I was with journalists and a lot from all over the world, and they were, again, surprised, happy, curious, loving, even though it was terrible British weather on that day. Everyone kept saying to me, "Oh, you brought the weather with you, didn't you?"
Well, I think it rained more heavily than it does in the UK, but that's a different discussion.
Was there any sort of feeling from him in that respect, on a non-diplomatic level, that he enjoyed being here, that he liked it, that he was surprised,
Yes, I mean, undoubtedly, because sometimes with these visits, you have the senior government ministers or officials who are still very caught up with what's going on at home. So they'll focus on doing the business while they're in country, and then they'll be on their phones or with their teams. That wasn't the case here. The Prime Minister wanted a bit of time. Bit of time to just look around, bit of time to talk about the place, bit of time to go and have a coffee out in the town.
Iraqi.
No, I don't think he did have some. I made sure he did have some white wine.
Okay.
Albanian white wine.
Good. I was going to say. Now there was a bit of a hiccup at the EPC summit. My phone started going crazy with journalists from the BBC and things asking me about what happened in the press conference. There seemed to be a bit of a blip in communication, perhaps, about what might happen or would not happen with the potential hosting of migrants from the UK, whether that was something that could ever be done in Albania. And Rama was quite firm about it. And then the British media was like, oh, Rama, shut him down in public, blah, blah, blah. What went on there?
So the reality is the Prime Minister did not come here expecting Albania to suddenly agree to something. It is simply that, as with other European states at the moment, the UK is looking at different options, essentially for handling those who no longer have a right to remain in the UK. And there are different ways of doing that. And it was one of those occasions where the Prime Minister very much felt he had to address the issue. I mean, as you know, it's a very live issue in the UK. And felt he had to address it, particularly as he was here in the Western Balkans. Now, I think there were those who therefore assumed there was a particular request to Albania. There was not.
No, okay.
There was no particular request. And I think, Prime Minister Rama has not just on that occasion, but previously as well, made his position very clear about this. So I don't think, there's no lack of clarity, or there were no surprises. I think the way in which it played out on a public stage created probably more attention than it needed.
Yes, it was sort of twisted. I declined the interviews in the end because they wanted it there and then, and I hadn't been able to see it, and I just said, no, I don't want to, because I can't imagine that conversation was not had at some point, and then it was just a surprise in public. It didn't seem...
It doesn't work like that.
So you touched on the strained relations that used to exist between the UK and Albania, and I mean, I'm talking about 2022 in particular, when there were the number of migrant crossings to the UK, and I mean, it was a pretty difficult time as a journalist as well, because I do correspond for the BBC, so I was constant on the phone, but then all the other media as well, and all they wanted, I had a few arguments as well in the British media, all they wanted to hear was that Albania is a terrible place and it's full of criminals, and they weren't really interested in understanding the nuances of why people want to leave, why they were taking those risks, but also the fact that the responsibility is not just with Albania in stopping this. There's a whole chain of, events that go on. Things are better now. When I look back to how it was and the war of words between the medias and even officials at the time, it was pretty bad. How have we got to this position now? What are the key sort of changes?
Unsurprisingly, I would say by some good diplomacy, as you'd expect. And I think, my predecessor, Alistair, should take a lot of credit for it.
He
I think hard time,
great job,
hard work, really not easy, but it shows that you can change these things. It shows that I think through some very open and honest conversations, realistic conversations, you can move things into an area of cooperation where both sides see that it's in their interest to work together and to address the situation. We've seen a huge drop in the number of Albanians trying to get to the UK, full stop. We've seen a huge decrease since 2022 in the number of Albanians trying to get there on small boats. That's a very positive thing. That doesn't mean there aren't still people trying to get to the UK illegally. And that's a situation we need to address. But we have in place some very good operational cooperation that I feel it's my job to both promote and protect. And it's allowed us the opportunity to use that as a foundation to widen that relationship. And if I want to do something here over the next 3 years, it's really to build on that and create a broader relationship. That can be around such hard issues as defence and security, which are, of course, very of the moment with the threats that exist in the world. But it's also around culture. And one of the things I would really like us to do is to broaden the kind of culture and soft power relationship. Because as you mentioned, there has been in the UK this perception that the Albanian diaspora are only involved in bad things. And it's just not true.
No,
that's a minority. I know people, I know Albanians who are living in the UK, who are business people, who are working in healthcare, who are teachers, all of them very much contributing to what the modern UK is about.
Yes.
And that's a very positive thing.